Hey guys, hope you're all doing well, and welcome to episode 3 of looking at Python and Docker. In this video, I want to show how you can use a Docker Compose file to basically run your apps in a much better way. So previously what we've been doing, we've just been taking an app, building its image via a Docker file, and then just running that image. The job of a Docker Compose is to basically take this to the next level. So rather than us having to manually build and manually run, we can just run a Docker Compose file. This then basically takes charge of building this and running this. Things like setting up mounts. So if we do something inside of our app, such as log to a file, Docker Compose can basically control the writing of that file kind of inside the container and then making it mount outside as well. We can also specify things like ports, environment variables. So I would almost exclusively use Docker Compose files. I very rarely just have a Docker file and build and run from this because it's a bit of overhead to make these initially, but then you can just run a single command and you can basically start and stop your containers. So we'll do it the traditional way, and we'll then go and look at Docker Compose and show how much easier it is in there. So what have I got? I've got a simple API Docker file, and it's basically just building this here. So this is a little fast API app. It logs to a file. It's got a single endpoint. It logs when that endpoint's been hit. It returns hello world. We have a requirements file. This just has fast API and Uvicorn inside it. Uvicorn because I'm using that as my web server to go ahead and run the fast API app. So normally what we would do is we would do something like this. We'd do docker build -t. So I want to call this, I'll just call it my app, or actually my API. We then do a -f to say what am I building from. In fact, the only reason I've done -f in this case is because my Docker file is just called api.dockerfile. If you stick to the original and just call it Dockerfile, you can just do a dot. But I guess it's more down to personal preference, really. And this dot here is kind of saying it's in this current directory. So if I go ahead and hit run, we should see this build. And finally, that's gone ahead and been built. So we come over here, go to my images. There it is. There's my API here in Docker Desktop. So if we can then do docker run, we now need to do -p. So 8,000 on my machine is going to go into 8,000 inside the Docker network, and my app is just called my API. So docker run, map my 8,000 to the containers 8,000, and let's do my API. Should take a second. Yeah, there we go. Looks good. Now, I want to draw your attention to something rather interesting. If I go inside my logs folder, see how nothing's appeared? But then inside main here, this is supposed to be creating that log file every single time. Now let's go to Docker Desktop. Let's go inside containers. Let's go inside here and then go into, I guess it's a touch bigger for you actually. So we can see we have logs here. Well, ls inside of logs, and we have a log file. So this exists inside the container, but doesn't exist here. So the reason that's happened is because we haven't told Docker to make this connection between the logs folder on my machine here in VS Code to the /app/logs folder inside here. So if I pwd here, we have app, logs, and if we just do cat logfile.log, nothing there currently, but if I go to this terminal and then run, let's do some curls, okay, we see hello world, that looks good. And then if we come back in here and then do logfile.log, we can see this log file is being written to. It's just not really affecting the one on our machine. Well, it's not making it at all, so that's bad. So let's go ahead and kill this. In fact, we can come in here and just do a Control-C. Yeah, that seems to have killed it. Let's head back in here for a sec. Yeah, that has indeed exited. We'll kill this container, delete forever. Right, now then, let's go ahead and do our Docker Compose. Now this will be in YAML format. The first thing I'm going to do is say version 3.9 here. So make sure you stick your version at the top. This is just the version of Compose that we're using. And then the way we do this is we then do services, and we then define all the services that we're going to be composing. If you're kind of piecing together lots of apps, like you might have a database, a front end, and a back end, those will just be individual services inside here. So we'll go ahead and define a first service. We'll say my service is called Python app. And the first thing we're going to have to do is tell it how to build. In this case, we're going to pass in 2 arguments. We're going to say a context and then a Docker file here. So there's my VS Code trying to make that happen. The context is just the current directory. So I'm already in the directory where I'm trying to build from, but the Docker file is just api.dockerfile here. So when we run our docker compose command, it's going to say this service, here's how you build it. It's context, here's the Docker file, go ahead and build. Now recall that when we did our run command, we did something like this, so docker run -p 8000. We've got to do the same thing inside here, so rather than us having to run this command every time, we can just specify it once inside here. So make sure you're still under the Python app kind of remit here, so kind of in the same level as where build is. And if we do ports, there we go, like this, as a string, I'm going to say 8000 like this here. Let's just run this as is for the time being, and we'll then worry about like mounting this log file directory a bit later on. So to run it, just do docker compose up, and if you do D, that's going to do detached. So it will start up in your current directory and then kind of free up the terminal for it to use. If you do --build, it's going to do a full rebuild. We should see it basically do exactly the same thing as our build command earlier on. And we can see here, it's gone ahead and started a container. So if we run back into here, we can now see we have this November thing here, which looks okay. It's called that because of the current directory I'm in, and that's okay. And if we see here, we have Python app, and there we go, it's running. So let's go ahead and come back in here, make sure we can run that. We can, that's good. It's still not logging anything, but that's fine for the time being. We'll do that next. And then what we can do is if we do docker compose down, there we go, back into here, there's now no longer any containers running and our app is now dead. So it can be good for development because you can just keep on doing like docker compose up, go ahead and build it, do some tests, docker compose down, and just keep rinsing and repeating, which is kind of cool. Now then, let's focus on this logs folder here. And we're going to do this in a really simple way. So if we say volumes here, do a little thing like this, and pass in a full string. And you'll see kind of how this looks here. My VS Code's been good and told me how to do it. It does host path, container path, and then mode. I'm not going to worry about mode for the time being, but this is generally where you do things like read only, read write, etc. So if we do a colon first, the thing on the left is going to be basically where do I want to mount from. So that's going to be my logs folder. So if I do dot this and then logs here, and then this is basically now saying from my side, so not inside the container, but from here in VS Code, this folder is going to mount to what inside the container. In this case, it's going to be /app/logs like this here, if I spell it right. Now let's try and do a docker compose up again. And now we should see something rather interesting. My logs folder is now populated. So we now have a log file, .log. Now let's go inside here, do a curl. Let's see if my VS Code likes this. Yeah, we go. So now if I kind of come out of this and let's do a few more. We can now see our log file on my machine. That's now logging stuff. And if we now go back here, let's do terminal inside this. So we are pwd is app. If we go into logs, so see how we're now in app/logs. And my docker compose, I've said mount .logs on my machine into app/logs in the container. So basically, like it's almost like these two kind of places are shared. So if I do ls here, that's logfile.log. Yeah, there we go. You can see stuff happening. Let's suppose I go in here and just do 1, 2, 3, save. Let's now do logfile.log. There we go, there's the 1, 2, 3. Obviously you wouldn't normally edit it straight away like that, but just to prove how this volumes thing is working, this basically does sort of like the same thing as this does here. This is port 8000 on my Mac and I'm on my normal machine, mounting to 8000 inside the container. This is just saying the logs folder here is mounting to /app/logs folder inside here. That's it. One more thing we can do, which is kind of cool. If I do environment, and let's suppose, for example, your application needs some environment variable. Let's go ahead in here and just do import OS, and let's just do os.getEnv. Let's just do, we'll do name like this here. So all that's going to happen is my endpoint's going to print what's behind this name variable whenever we hit the endpoint. For the time being, we'll just get rid of this for a second. And let's go ahead and do a rebuild of that container. So I'll do docker compose up dbuild again. And yeah, that looks good. Okay, now let's hit the endpoint a few times. Okay, back into our container. And then see how it's done none here? That's of course because that environment variable doesn't exist. In fact, if we go inside and do printenv, you can see these are the we can see these are the environment variables that are existing inside my container. Now if we go back into our Docker Compose file, we'll do, oh no, not env file, sorry. We're going to do environment like this here. And then, in fact, it is just called name, isn't it? Yeah, it is. So let's go ahead and do hello like this. Let's rebuild a container. So Docker Compose upd build again. It'll rebuild it. There you go, detach. So we can now use the terminal again. Back into here. And now let's go ahead and hit our endpoint. So we'll come back into this terminal, hit run a few times, back into our logs, and we now see we have hello. That's it. If we go into the terminal, print env, we see name is equal to hello here. So just using this environment section, you can really easily set environment variables inside this individual service. Bear in mind, if you have multiple services, you're going to be setting environment variables differently for each of them. But hopefully that was helpful. That's a really basic take on how you can use a Docker Compose file. In this case, just to run a single service application, we've said you're going to be building from this Docker file, map this port of my machine to this one in the container, go ahead and map this folder to that one in the container, and also set this environment variable whenever you build a container. Cheers for watching, guys, and have a great weekend.